Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Best Books Ever. I'm Tyler, and today, continuing the Cirque du Freak series by Darren Shan, we got Killers of the Dawn. Uh, Something I've noticed, I don't know if this is true, there's like a pattern with the other books, but like we've said before, these books are kind of separated into trilogies. So this is the last book. This is book 9. So this would be the last book of this like quote unquote trilogy, right? Because there's one, two, three, and then four, five, six, and then seven, eight, and nine. Seven, eight, nine all had of the in their titles. Um, so this is Killers of the Dawn. We had Allies of the Night, and we had what was the other one? We had Allies of the Night, and then we flip back. Hunters of the Dusk. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know if that was. I don't think the other ones are true because we had like a Living Nightmare, Vampire's Assistant, Tunnels of Blood. So yeah. So the other ones don't really match, but I don't know if that was intentional. But I thought that was cool. But yeah, book 9. After this, we have, I guess, the final trilogy and also the final 3 books in the series. Uh, I feel like quantity-wise, not a lot to talk about with this book, but quality-wise, again, kind of crazy. Kind of crazy. So, obviously, we will start with the end like we always do. And big reveal, right? This is something, obviously, I have read this book before, as well as the entire series, right? I read book 1 through 12, all that stuff, right? This is something, the big reveal at the end of this book is something that I have thought for a while. Again, I feel like I remembered this for quite a while, but obviously I don't know it's true until it happens or until it doesn't happen. And so for many books now, I've been thinking in my head, like, I think I remember Steve being the Vampaneze Lord. I'm pretty sure that's how this turns out. And he's like the evil one, and Darren's like the good one, and it's like, that sort of relationship. But I was like, I just don't know, like maybe. And again, it's getting kind of weird because it's like, the Vampaneze Lord is always hidden, but it makes sense, like obviously from the twist perspective, it has to be hidden because there's the mystery, and there's also kind of like a sleight of hand where it's like you always have your attention on them, and you don't think about it being a trick. That's actually not the Vampaneze Lord, but from like a in-universe perspective, it makes sense, right? Because it's like, why would we ever risk another vampire, any vampire, not even the hunters, just any vampire knowing what the Vampaneze Lord looks like? Because if he does, that gives you a better chance of being able to pick him off. Because this whole time we never knew what he looks like. Like we have the big reveal in this book where he takes his hood off and is like, oh, he's just kind of like a normal looking dude. Which, in hindsight, what else were you expecting? He's just a guy, He's just a guy the same way that Darren is just a guy, you know. Um, but the big twist, I haven't said it, even though I've kind of said it. Steve Leonard is the Vampaneze Lord. It makes sense going back, you know. Crepsley said he was evil. Steve is very much hung up on that, which, if we just take a slight detour, absolutely hate Steve. Hate Steve with all of my heart. As I was reading this book, I was trying to think back to all the other series that we've covered so far on Best Books Ever, and I'm thinking like, has there been another character that I have just despised this much? And obviously, there's antagonists, there's villains to stories, but has there been one where I'm like, man, I really want him to die? Like, I really want him to cease to exist by the end of this story. And the one that I thought of was I don't know. I don't want to spoil anything. I guess the character existing isn't really a spoiler. So I'm just going to say there's a character called Ambrose in the Kingkiller Chronicle series. And he's probably the closest. Um, I would say, he could kind of take the spot as number one, as enemy number one. I will say Steve is more frustrating because Ambrose is just kind of like, he's kind of just like a rich, spoiled kid who sucks, and he very much flaunts and abuses the money and the power that he has. Very kind of typical sort of, but like Steve is just like he's twisted in the head. Like he is evil, and like he keeps he keeps harkening back to Crepsley calling him evil, as well as him saying that Darren betrayed him. And every time he says it, just cringe because it's like that's not at all what happened. That's not what happened. Again, I don't know if I said this last time or if I was thinking this time and now I'm about to say it. I don't remember, but like one, that's not what happened. Darren didn't betray you. He didn't set you up. Okay, Crepsley did indeed think you were evil, and that's why he denied you, right? And I think that in itself is enough to hate Crepsley. I'm not mad that Steve hates Crepsley, right? It makes perfect sense. You get called evil by somebody who you, in your own heart, you don't believe you're evil, and so you're like, what? Like being called evil by someone and like them true, like it not being a joke, it being, or not even referring to like a certain incident, like, oh man, you know, that kind of an evil thing to do. It's like, no, 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 in your heart, in your blood, literally, you are an evil person. Um, you don't really need anything more to dislike that person at the very least, right? Like it makes sense that he hates him. But the fact that he thinks that Darren set him up, you know, I don't even know when that would have happened. And also, like, Darren showed no interest in wanting to become a vampire. Like, he didn't know about Verhorsten. Like, he didn't know about any of this stuff. So, like, it's weird for him to think that Darren set him up and, like, so, like, he set him up in the way that he wanted Crapsley to tell him that he was evil, like, play a prank on him and to, like, deny him and everything. That makes no sense given what your and Darren's relationship was. And then it's like, okay, well, maybe he didn't do that. Maybe he joined Crepsley as a vampire assistant to get back at Steve. But even that's like, why? Like, when would that have happened? Like Steve was always the one that was super, like, they were both into like the horror stuff, but Steve was the one that was like researching and like, like Darren was just a fan. He just liked it. Like, there's no way that he would have found out that Crepsley was a vampire, an actual real life vampire, while Steve did. Like it doesn't make any sense. Like Steve resenting and even hating Crepsley for calling him evil. Not mad at that, but him having this weird like scenario that Darren and Darren and Crepsley conspired against him to get back at him for a reason that doesn't exist. Like, I mean, we know the truth. He did it because Darren wanted to save his life because the spider and everything. But it's like, I don't understand. Like, neither one of them has motive to get at you. Like, Crepsley called you evil, but he didn't have anything behind that. He wasn't like, you're evil, and also I'm gonna ruin your life. Like, why? Crepsley is in no way that type of vampire. He's like, you're evil, and I'm done with you, and I wish I'd never see you again. And then Darren is like, why would he? Like, he was truly your best friend. Like, he truly thought he was your best friend. Why would he all of a sudden flip a switch? I don't know. I just, every time Steve speaks, it's just like, what? Like, what you're saying makes no sense. Like, it's not even something that is unlikely. It's something that when you really break it down, you think about it logically, none of those motives make sense. They just don't exist. In no world do those motives exist. So, again, him being evil, that's aside from it. But everything else that he's built on top of it, this like thing that he's convinced himself of, it's like there's a sports reference for you. Michael Jordan he like admitted this, that like he would make up stories about his opponents, that like he would like make up things that his opponents said about him, so that he would like fuel his own fire, his own like competitive spirit to like play better and to like want to crush them in the uh in the basketball games, right? And it's crazy because like his opponents will come out after him and be like, yeah, I never said that to him, or like I never did this or that. And then Jordan came out and was like, oh yeah, I just made all that stuff in my head. And it's like, you are a psycho. It's kind of like what Steve is doing, except he's not admitting that that he made it up. He truly believes in his heart of hearts that this is what they did, and so I don't know. This all leads back around to Steve being the Vampaneze Lord, and I mean, again, it makes sense in hindsight, right? Like him being evil, him being a half Vampaneze now. We learned that. We connect those dots that we know that the Vampaneze Lord was half-blooded. And just destiny, too. Like, obviously, Mr. Tiny and all that, but just destiny, when you think about that being such an integral part of this story, it seems, is like, yeah, it would make sense that Darren is like the good guy that's kind of on the rise, rising in the ranks of the vampires, and Steve is the bad guy. Um, so this means a lot. Obviously, the Vampaneze Lord that died was fake, and his death doesn't matter at this point. The game is still on, right? We have Vancha and Darren who still have to now hunt Steve, and now it's in its final stages. I mean, obviously, there's only 3 books left out of the 12, so we're in the final quarter of the story. But also, it's like, Endgame is here. I don't know if they count this whole book basically as one encounter. Remember, there's 4 encounters, so I don't know if this is like, maybe it's not encounters, maybe it's more just like opportunities. So maybe this whole thing counts as opportunity number 2. Back when they first, back when Steve saved Darren from RV, before we knew all the lies and the truths behind that, all the way till now. I don't know if that all counts as one. I'm assuming it does. So they still have 2 more chances left. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Aside from that, we have Crepsley dying. I did like the little part there because I was so confused because, like I said, I've read this, so in the back of my head, I was like, I'm pretty sure Steve's the Vampaneze Lord. So the quote unquote Vampaneze Lord that was tossed off into the spikes, I was like, too good to be true. I think that's fake. I think that's even more so, confirming what my theory that I remember is. And then we have Micah coming in, saving him, killing Gannon, Crepsley throwing a knife in Steve's back, killing him. The vampires coming and saving everybody. Everything's good. And I was like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I remember this book very, very, this series very, very differently. And then I'm thinking, like, what are the last 3 books then? Because they won. I mean, unless Steve isn't actually dead or something in this, moment. But yeah, I do like that. This little reminder that this is Darren's diary, and so him kind of going off the path a little bit and being like, him, whenever he's writing this, because he obviously not writing this in the moment, him just kind of putting, this little section here because this section hurts him so much that he throws in a fantasy into the diary of like, oh, everyone was saved, everyone's good, everyone's alive, all the dead people are dead, all that stuff. And then for him to cut himself off and be like, except that's not how it happened, and then you feel the dread, right? I was a little confused when I was reading this, though. I was like, why did Crepsley give himself up? But then after I reread it, I realized, okay, cool. So the situation here was, one, either he continues to hold on and he drags Steve down and him and Steve die, but the rest of the Vampaneze destroy Darren, Vancha, Harkat, Debbie, Burgess, all them guys, right? Or option B is he lets go, makes it so Steve does not get dragged down with him, he dies, and the Vampaneze will let all of his friends go. Now, in hindsight, with this little very, very important tidbit of information, Crepsley should have dragged him down. Because even if he dragged him down, Vampaneze slaughtered our crew here. Would have been for the best because Steve is the Vampaneze Lord. Obviously, they didn't know that, so they were just like, it's not worth it. We just beat the Vampaneze Lord. Like, let us go. Like, Steve still deserves to die, but our main objective for our clan has been successful, and now we are going to win this war. Very sad to see Crepsley go. I'm very interested to see how this affects the rest of the story. The last 3 books. How this affects Darren specifically. Like, is he going to let revenge take over his entire life? Right? Will he turn into Steve? You know. I mean, I guess the easy part about this, in terms of like letting revenge consume him, is prior to him knowing that Steve was the Lord. It was just like, we want to kill him. I'm sure Darren and Vansha will hunt for him. Not a priority though, because we just won. But then we fast forward to post reveal, and Steve's the Vampaneze Lord. It's like, I mean, revenge doesn't have to consume us. We have to kill Steve. Like, we have to now. So I guess that kind of makes it easier, because if he wasn't the Lord and they won, then I kind of, we just war internally of like, we won though. Like, is it, going forward in these years, decades, centuries going forward, it's like, how much time do we want to dedicate to hunting down Steve when he's just a guy? He's a very important guy. Betrayed us very many times. He is one of, if not the main reason that Crepsley's dead. But how much do we want this to kind of bog down the rest of our lives? Or is it even a bog down? Is it something that we feel like is right and just? Something that we need to do? But now that we know it's a Vampaneze Lord, it's like, oh, we have to do it anyway. Like, we literally have to. So, yeah. Crepsley being gone is very unfortunate. Something that I'm sure never really would have thought would have happened. Even me going into this, reading this for the second time, I don't think I would have guessed that Crepsley dies in this story. So, sad stuff. We'll see how this affects the rest of the hunt. Obviously, we're 1 hunter down. We still have 2 more, though. Yeah, and we'll get into a little more, like, predictions in a moment, but yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I feel like those were the most important things. Now I just have a few smaller things I want to mention, and one big overarching idea here that I have is humans helping. Now, obviously, we have the Vampets that help the Vampaneze. Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff there. But on the other side, we have the vampires, which I think are less eager to have humans be meddled in all this stuff. But we do have a few moments I'd like to touch on, kind of from both sides of humans helping vampires. So we have Alice Burgess, the chief inspector, who does an amazing job, right? For all she did, we know that she lives at the end. She helps take Debbie back home. That's another thing that we'll get into with predictions, I'm sure, is what happens with Debbie. But yeah, she takes Debbie home, and in it, we have her kind of struggle of being the chief inspector of, you guys are serial killers, going through and learning more and more, and kind of seeing with her own eyes. Like, there's been a couple times, I think there's like 2 or 3 times in this book where she says, I'm still not really sure about you guys, but I know evil when I see it. And I see Steve, I see the Vampaneze, like, these guys are evil. I'm not sure if you guys are good or evil yet. You might be kind of in the middle somewhere, but if I had to choose one group to go after first, it's definitely Steve and the Vampaneze. So, I like that, and it just goes to show that, like, very, very tough to convince humans about all the vampire stuff, just in its most basic form. And now we have the War of Scars that we have to explain. It's like, oh, how much time do you have? It's going to take hours for me to, really thoroughly try to convince you. Um, but I do like that slowly she sort of realized, again, she just had to see it with her own eyes. Like, oh, this is what's happening. And I'm starting to believe you, because we kind of see, I can see how y'all move, and then I can see how Steve and the Vampaneze move, and they are clearly way more, devilish than y'all have been to me. Um, so that's sort of a good instance of a human coming in and helping. And she even promised at the end, she was like, if y'all need help, just call me. And I'm like, that's good. That's good. I don't know if we'll see her again, but that is nice. On the other hand, we have Richard, who was Darren's friend, really probably his only friend at school, right? He does not help. He was terrified, petrified. He immediately called for help. Vampire, vampire, vampire. Had to knock him out. That was unfortunate. You wanted Richard to be cool and, sort of let him use their house for just a night, you know? Um, I do like that Darren doesn't really blame him, though. He's just like, he's a human. He has no idea what's going on. He saw the news. He sees me. Like, he is connecting the dots in the most logical way with the information that he has available to him. Can't be mad at that. But again, like I said, it is just the other side of the coin where it's like Burgess is the outlier, even though we as the reader, we're like, we know everything that's happening. We know the truth. Um, so we think that Burgess is the standard. We think that Burgess is how people should act in in these trying times. But really, Richard is the one. He's like, no, you're crazy. Vampires aren't real. You're a killer. I've seen it on the news. You know. So yeah, sad stuff there. And just a couple other things. Another example of just doubling down on Steve's evilness. Steve, when he escaped the police station, I guess, killed a bunch of people, killed some nurses, killed some other people, injured a bunch of people when he escaped. And I love that moment. Obviously, what happened is awful. And like I said, it just doubles down on how evil Steve really is. Because he didn't have to kill. I don't think, right? Like, he could have just ran out. I don't know. I'm not sure they would have let him walk out. I'm sure they probably had some questions for him and stuff. But him being half Vampaneze, like, he could have easily just escaped without injuring a single person, I'm sure. So the fact that he murdered a bunch of people is like, but I do love that moment because it is sort of a spark of doubt in the police and the investigators or whatever, where they hear that's happening, and then I think one of them turns to Darren, and Darren just repeats what he's been saying for a while, where he's like, I'm not your enemy. We're on the same side. I didn't kill anybody. And there's a spark of, doubt in their minds where it's like, because the hostage that was in the grasp of what you thought to be 4 serial killers just escaped, which is weird that he would want to run when he has injuries and stuff like that. And he also just murdered a bunch of people on his way out. Not necessary. So now that kind of gives you a different perspective of like, what's going on here? Again, you wouldn't immediately guess everything that's happening because that would be insane to expect of a regular person, but it does kind of push you off balance of like, wait, why would he run away? Why did he kill people? What? He killed a bunch of nurses? What? So yeah, didn't obviously make them immediately believe Darren of like, oh my God, you're right. But it is like, what is happening? So. And then last note I have here, the Vampaneze Lord has to be the one to kill the hunters. Now, I wanted to just make note of that because I think it's interesting, just with that fact, as it reads, gives them something different to sort of plan for. Like, oh, that makes sense why the multiple encounters we've had, they have not killed us. when they very easily could have, because they can't. I mean, they can, but I don't remember exactly the wording. I don't know if it immediately means that they fail and the vampires are going to win, or if it just severely reduces their chances. Um, but they don't want to take that chance. So that makes sense. And it does give us a little more hope, as much hope as we can have at the end of the book. Of like, okay, so we have to. So Steve is the only one that can kill us. Doesn't mean that the other one can't injure us. Can't injure us to a breath of our life, and then Steve just deals the killing blow. But it does make us sleep maybe a little bit easier, and also give us a little bit more breathing room when it comes to, just like encountering other Vampaneze in the wild, or Vampets or anything like that. Where it's like a Vampet is not going to get the upper hand on us, and without us even recognizing there's someone there on like the rooftop, or we're not going to get sniped from the rooftop, because that would go against what the prophecy says. But also on a much larger scale, I think it's interesting because, one, Tiny given slightly different information to both camps, given a little bit tidbits here that they don't give to the vampires, given a little bit of tidbits here they don't give to the Vampaneze. It's interesting. I wonder what game he's playing. If it is just fun for him, if it's just amusing to him, because he's like, I'm a god. I don't care what happens to the vampires and Vampaneze. I'm gonna outlive them by millennia. Like, I just like seeing him squabble, you know. Or if there is something more in it for him, if there is some sort of direction that he would prefer it takes, maybe what he says is not set in stone. Maybe it's just him nudging them in the direction that he wants. We don't know. We don't know. But that is the book. That is everything. Next book is The Lake of Souls. Lake of Souls. Very ominous. I would not want to visit a Lake of Souls. That sounds like a not fun time for anyone involved. Predictions. What do we think next book? So Lake of Souls doesn't really give me a whole lot. Unless it's metaphorical. They might encounter a Lake of Souls. Don't know what that means. Metaphorically, it sounds like heaven or the afterlife of some sort. Like a lake full of souls of dead people. We've talked about souls a lot when it comes to vampire beliefs, because they have their, they want their souls to go on to paradise, which they do, unless there's like a few things, right, where it's like, if you leave them lying face down or something, or I don't know, whatever. But yeah, that's a whole thing. So I don't know if it's metaphorical or real. Because I guess real could exist, right? I mean, we live in this world with like people like Mr. Tiny and stuff like that. So it's like, it could be real. Dragons exist apparently. We talked about that before with like Hardcat's dreams, and even the lady, the witch who's not a witch, kind of talked about it. Like, oh yeah, no, that happened. So yeah. I think we're gonna see a lot of. I mean, again, I don't know where the next book's gonna pick up from. If it's gonna be like right after, or because I think a little bit of a time jump could happen, but I feel like there's some stuff that needs to be addressed. I think that we're definitely gonna deal with a lot of Darren trying to come to terms with Crepsley being gone. I think that's hit him hard. Like really, really hard. Probably even more so than Vansha, even though Vansha's known Darren. He's known Crepsley for way longer than Darren. Yeah, so I think we're gonna deal with that. I think we're gonna deal with him maybe dealing with revenge and trying to parse in his own mind of like, what should I do? Like him fighting internally with his overwhelming rage and fury, and wanting to seek revenge on Steve with the more logical side of him, where it's like, I can't just hunt him down and run into him and going guns blazing. Like it's just not gonna work. It's not smart. Also dealing with Vancha, where it's like Vancha's probably dealing with very similar things of like, what is he thinking? I'm sure there again side of him that wants to just run in and track down every Vampaneze, slaughter every Vampaneze on Earth, and not just kill Steve, but torture him for a long time before he allows him to die. Um, so yeah, probably some of that. More immediate. Oh, will we see a funeral for that? We got one for Paris. Who I realized this afterwards. I did misspeak last episode. I confused Paris with Saba. Last episode, I referred to Paris as the mentor to Crepsley. That's not true. Saba is the mentor to Crepsley. Paris is the prince. So crazy that the prince is dead. um. We did have a funeral for them. We didn't really see it, but that was a big thing. So I wonder, Crepsley also being very, very well known. I wonder if that'll be a thing that we see, or if we just kind of blip over it. Some smaller stuff, will we see Alice again? Debbie, I think, needs to be addressed. Where it's like, we can't just do a time jump and us not mention Debbie. Like, what is Debbie? Like, we need to have a conversation. Darren and Debbie need to sit down and talk about what happened and what this means for them. Like, Debbie did say that she loves him. While I think that's very true, I think that is also, she was very emotional in that moment. Um, I have no delusions about them like running off together, or even Debbie like joining them and being like, I love you, I want to be with you, I'm gonna be part of the crew. Like, I don't see that. Not that Debbie isn't tough, but I don't think she belongs in the middle of this war. And I don't think Darren, as much as on one hand you could be like, oh, but honestly, the safest spot for you is probably with me. I can protect, I think that he would much rather her be as far away from him as possible. That something needs to happen there. Any other characters? I mean, we have RV and Gannon and stuff, but they're retreated. They're honestly probably not even in the tunnels anymore. I wouldn't be surprised if they leave the city, if all the Vampaneze leave the city and they go somewhere else. Are there any characters I'm missing? That's like, oh, we gotta talk about them. What's going on with them? No. I mean, Hardcat. I haven't mentioned Hardcat, but he's just gonna go along with Darren. I can't imagine he's gonna all of a sudden be like, all right, I'm out. I gotta do something. That doesn't seem right to me. So yeah, Lake of Souls. I mean, again, I imagine we're gonna get some resolution to some of the smaller, like I said, Debbie or whatever, and then they're gonna go full blown. We're hunting down Steve, because like I said, I don't think they're gonna stay here. I feel like they're gonna retreat and go somewhere else in the country or in the world. So now it's like hunting them down, and not sure how they're gonna do that, because they stumbled upon this place sort of accidentally. So, although to be fair, Steve will probably lay a bread trail for them, I imagine, just like he's done before. So that's probably, his own hubris will be his downfall. Yeah, that's it. That is it. So next time, read the entirety of The Lake of Souls. That is book 10. Almost there. We're so close to the end, and I am very interested to see how this ends. I don't quite remember. There are aspects to the ending of the series that I remember pretty vividly, but overall not a whole lot, honestly. So read the whole thing, and we will see what happens as we continue this series and how they are able to track down Steve and hopefully end him.